So if there's one thing, I would say peace has succeeded war. I'm only 70, so I cannot look back on 100 years personally, but my mother is over 100. The biggest change over the last century, from what my mum tells me, is that China was beset with non-stop wars, from the warlord period to civil war to the Japanese aggression to another liberation war, and then when New China was set up, no more wars inside China. My family has been in China for a long time. My mother's parents came to China over 100 years ago, and they fell in love with China. My grandparents met here, and they married here, and my mother was born here in China in 1915, so she grew up in China. My dad was drawn to China by the communists. In 1935, he had joined the Communist Party of Great Britain. He was a communist, and when he read Edgar Snow's account in Red Star Over China about the heroic feats of the Chinese Communist Party and the Long March and so on, he became fascinated by China. So in 1938, he came to China, and also he immediately fell in love with China. Well, not just with China, but he met my mother, fell in love with my mother, and the two of them got married, and the two of them just kept up an interest in China. They, especially in what the communists were doing in China. But after the war, they came back to China to study the land reform under the communists, and that was fascinating. So they've published books about the land reform and village history, and they were invited to stay in China to teach English in preparation for the founding of New China. So I think they felt proud that they were able to contribute to this great development. I was born in Beijing, and now I turned 70 this year, but I've done a quick reckoning. I've spent about 50 years in Beijing, but it's not continuous. I find that I have left China many times, but I keep coming back to Beijing. Well, there's a wonderful draw. I think maybe one of the reasons I keep coming to Beijing, it is changing constantly, and I always want to know what's going to happen next. Well, obviously, you know, the way I see it is China has changed from a sick man of the East to a powerhouse in world economy, and also a power for creating, I think, a more peaceful, harmonious world. The perception of China has obviously changed an awful lot. The good changes. For example, I'd say that the Chinese Communist Party was founded in 1921. They immediately linked up with the nationalists and other progressive forces in trying to reunite China from the warlord, from the division, to create a unified China. And then in the face of Japanese aggression, the Chinese communists also worked hard to unite with patriotic forces to defeat the Japanese aggressors. So a great contribution. And of course, then when the Chinese Communist Party set up the People's Republic of China, the social economic changes have been tremendous. Life expectancy practically doubled. When I look at Western media reports of China, are they objective, and do they tell the whole story, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Often they don't. There are many instances where, for example, when there are positive developments, these are not reported. When there are problems, they are blown up out of all proportion. Look at issues of human rights, for example. I think that the world knows that certain Western countries have terrible issues of racism and arbitrary killings and locking up large segments of the population and so on, compared to which China's human rights record is actually rather good. And yet, if you look at mainly Western countries, I think, truthfully, that Western media reports tend to focus on the negative. Any country in its development is bound to encounter problems. The issue is, are they dealing with it successfully? Are they getting better? I do see the media reports from many other non-Western sources, some developing countries, and many of them are much more fair and impartial. I've been wondering why it is that Western media is often so very negative about, and for the last couple of 100 years, the Western powers especially have been the dominant powers. They have a military presence all over the entire globe with hundreds of military bases. And I think that the rise of China is perceived as a threat to their world dominance. However, it has not sent, except for peacekeeping troops, China has not sent any militaries to Africa, to Europe, to South America, and so on. So I think that the perceived threat to Western dominance is the reason why a lot of, where there's Western media that gives these reports which distort what China is doing. China has had a lot of involvement in, for example, Africa, but it's not conflict. It's building bridges and roads and sending medical teams to help with, and so on. Well, this year we're celebrating the 100th anniversary of the founding of the Chinese Communist Party, and I think that anyone who reviews what the Chinese Communists have accomplished in leading China to build a better society, that I think that they should just say, well done, go China, keep it up, and not only make China a better place, make the entire world a better, help to make the world a better place.